boom. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. We are going to be talking about Girl Approved. We're going to be talking about adding new senses to humanity, increasing our perception, increasing the scientific method. We have so much to unpack with our guest today, Heidi Therese Dangelmaier. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, my honor. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
We really
appreciate
and that was
it.
real. That was real. I didn't make that up. Yeah.
Everything that you discuss is so important, and we are about to unpack that
Okay.
in as much detail as we can in our super short episodes, which are still kind of long, but we'll try and get as much of it done as we can.
I'm here.
All right, so we got 12 years as the founder of Girl Approved.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's quite a while now. So now it's been a 12-year experiment that you've been running. Yeah. So
Yeah.
tell us about this experiment.
They do the experiment. Well, I think it's, to understand the motive of it, we had to go back to when I was at Princeton and I was working on my doctorate in computer science. Well, actually it was in quantum physics and AI, looking at the intersection of them. And that's when I started to wonder if I was picking up on different information than some of the men in the department, because even though they were all super smart, there was certain theorems that were really hard to solve that were kind of easy for me. And so I kept having these things where I'm like, I think I know more. Or I could see them solve problems that I knew weren't correct and there would be unintended consequences. So I started to wonder that if being female, I was picking up on different patterns in nature than my male peers. And that became really a motivation for me, because I realized that this information could solve hard problems or even prevent many unintended consequences, and it could be applicable to design. And so anyway, my experiment was the first time ever that girls mobilized to explore what they were naturally capable of cognitively and creatively, independent of what was assigned from men. And that was sort of the motive. So it wasn't really I wasn't looking at men saying, hey, you have fancy titles and you're not getting paid more. I was like, shit, I really think that there's something fundamental missing from science, forecasting, design that I can pick up on. And if we capture that, maybe we'll do a better job here in culture and medicine and any other field. So that was the motivation for my experiment.
And we have this really awesome graphic to show as well on our stream, and it's the first kind of graphic that you sent me as well. Can we throw it up in studio as well? No, it's all good. Yeah. And so here you see that it's like it's like a chessboard, and you have men, man-made, and then woman, girl-approved. Boys, help has arrived. And after 5,000 years of letting men play master creator, there's this sort of unleashing and unlocking of this full potential of women. And you use the word delight, and I love that word.
Well, if you already see here, it's after 5,000 years of letting men play master creator, help has arrived, boys, which is what we need is help. I mean, the foundation from genetics to quantum physics, there's some hard problems that have AI, there's hard problems out there that we need to crack.
Yeah.
And it was very important, even the design of this, is that I did a representation of the female and what was her moves. It wasn't just any old woman, it was the chess player. Actually, the queen has a very powerful role.
Totally.
She can go anywhere she pleases. That's why I chose this. But it's important because it represents the symbology of what are the rules that govern her behavior on the game of life. So basically what's very, very important is I'm not saying men suck. This is nothing subjective. We're not getting paid. What we're bringing to the table is exactly what has driven progress from the beginning of time, which is better tool, advancements to science, advancements to knowledge, better metrics, better models.
Yep.
And so I'm not a female group talking about how much money I bring in. I'm not talking subjectively or vaguely. I'm saying, look, you guys, for 5,000 years have presented the first set of engineering and economic tools using your instrument, your man-made, and they got us an amazing step forward, but we need a little something new. Not because we need something new because we're stuck as fuck. And so anyway, that's sort of to set the tone before I share the work.
And we have this slide that's coming up as well that explains the senses that, we'll pull it up, but the slide that explains senses, just hearing, sight, touch, taste, feel, etc. And that there is something else past that we're not really exploring. And some of those that we talked about prior to this were meaningful engagement. Another one being cause and effect, understanding how people have the feelings that they have and why they have them, what variables are going on for that. And then I had the other one was, creativity as well was another one. I really thought that these were kind of like key principles to unlock in the human spirit.
So what I want to say, and then I'm going to explain that, but before we go on, it says here, new rule, everyone wins.
Yeah.
So I just want to set the tone that even though it was females that did this work, our entire motive was, can we help humanity better? Can we do a better job at cultural design? Can medicine improve? Can industrial design improve? Can we predict and understand our true needs better? Can we deal something about mental illness? So it's like everyone wins. This is not a man versus women thing.
Totally.
And so what you brought up.
That's really important to reiterate
huge.
Again. Yeah. This is everyone wins. This is not man versus woman whatsoever.
No.
This is actually unlocking the full potential of humanity by figuring out that there is so much delight within the child of both a girl as well as a boy, and we kind of squash that by our economic and political system.
Well, you actually brought up an interesting point, is why did I say girl approved? So the experiment was really about, after from a young age, and women are brought up to study the philosophical, spiritual, scientific, ontological, all of these belief systems and methods and mathematics, which are awesome, but they've all pretty much come from the male instrument. And so what I started to realize, that I didn't want to just know what it was to be a mature woman who's mastered all of that. Was there something as a female, as a girl, born with it? Was I born with the capacity to contribute across that had never really been explored? So that's why I didn't say woman approved.
Yeah.
I wanted to discover as something I was born with, not taught.
Yep.
And so, but you get to what's the experiment? That's really what you're getting at. And the experiment was that, if you look through the history of time, the big question is, who have we trusted for the knowledge that we need to be all we can be, whether it's personally, or collectively, or that which governs, our politics, our culture. And if you look throughout time, we had either the artistic spiritual men for a long, long time, and then with the scientific revolution, became the scientists. So there was a real changing of the guards between the artistic, what I might call the more feminine men, the spiritual, artistic, the poet. Men move from within is primarily what was honored the most in terms of visionary, and who we looked up to for thoughts. But
then we went to kind of like telescopes and microscopes and
also like the poets and who did the kings hire? So we really had a great regard for the beliefs of those.
That was more like spiritual and inward, and now we've moved more in the Renaissance towards outward.
So I would have said that one might even call that the more feminine, but if you look at the inward day, that's what we look to. And then with the scientific method, there was a regime shift. And that's when the men came along and said, okay, well, what if any of these, some guru was crazy, and he, these were people with special skills. So the point of science was sort of to unionize truth and say, okay, what can we all know so that no man would be under some oppression of some sort of crazy guru dude or some religious system that shut down the truth. So really they're trying to unionize human knowledge and the advancement of it. So it was a good thing.
Definitely.
But
restricted to the five senses.
Or, before we get that, they could only give math to the five senses, but it was still the spiritual men versus the more, like, say, metric men. So there was one side is like, if you can't measure it, if you can't speak, if you can't, it doesn't exist. It all became about what can we measure and what can we test empirically. And that was really partly the inside moved our outside senses. That was really what it was about. And so it was really a division between what part of the human experience do we trust or not. And so basically, if you couldn't measure it, if you couldn't give it a mathematics, it didn't exist. And that's really what the spiritual men and the artists couldn't do, even though they were governed by something. So
there's like this whole new math, this whole new system of modeling, this whole new system of metrics for
that. Well, that's what they don't trustworthy.
For the subjective, for the internal for experience as well. And it's great to blend that together.
Exactly. The men threw that out. They didn't know how to do with it, so they threw it out. But you have to realize is that
I think it was retained also through environments like Buddhism and through the practice of meditation, like especially in Southeast Asia.
I'm going to up that ante. It was actually retained through other, like Freemasonry. In all of this alchemist, if you look at the founding fathers, they actually were personally governed by the alchemistic beliefs. Those were inward practices. And so those were highly what you call enlightened men. But there became a problem. So it was good intention, but we hadn't talked about women. At that point, the men were like, coming out of the age of air, they didn't consider the female a trustworthy instrument because she was so given to emotion and intuition. So when they came up with what can we give science, language, metrics to, they decided to consider the male instrument idealized. So what they did was they didn't just dismiss the poetic men. They didn't include the women because we were considered too driven by these fleets of intuition. So all we really, really, really knew is when they unionized men, what can they all give language to? You can't say anything. So that was an untested assumption, that the women's intuition or the women would like dirty up the data. We were like an inaccurate instrument.
Not augment the data and make it better, which is what we're talking
about. What we're going to
shift
shift into. But remember, there was a lot of people that believed in the inward world, and we're still back at that today. They just couldn't give it a language, a math, a model. They couldn't operationalize it. They couldn't explain it scientifically. So anyway, so you have to realize is that suddenly we have this viewpoint, and that viewpoint is all based on, this is where the 96 comes in. What you can describe with the outside world, the part of the mind they could model is known today as only like 3 to 4% of what the brain's really picking up on and how it really models things. But they could only model 4% of the world, the physical part. That's all they could describe is the physical dynamics, and that's only 4%. But what happened was now they have this, here's our new laws. This 4% box is what we know. And it wasn't just that all of a sudden everything had to comply to that. So education had to be defined through that. Health. So instead of this whole global experience we're capable of, everything that became legitimate, trustworthy, respectable, modern science had to comply, even anything we want to explain through that 4%. And that became a real reductionism on understanding living experiences. And so what's super important is that
I want to make sure that just to say, because right here, this is somewhere where I've kind of like pushed back on you a little bit, although I agree with you in many ways. I'm still unsure if it's like 99% or 1% or 68% and whatever 32%, because I'm not quite sold on the exact percentages, but I'm happy that you found a numbered system that makes it make sense.
These are numbers that people speak about. We only can model the exterior senses, only, the outside senses only describe 3-ish% of what the brain's picking up on. It's already known. That comes from neuroscience. They know that. If you describe what you're seeing right here, right now, time, space, of this This
Sure, you only see a small fraction of his life
there's a whole lot of
spectrum.
other shit going on in the
You don't
back.
see any of the microbial.
They don't know what's going on in the brain. That only describes a little bit of what's happening.
There's a lot of flow that's going from your visual cortex into your thalamus right now. That's giving you the idea of where you are and what you're perceiving. Actually, it's 6 times more information is going from the brain in than from outside into the brain. So there's, but see these percentages.
Well, I mean, let's just say it's a tiny bit compared to the other.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was just going with that.
Okay, but I just sort of named a number. It turned out that if you want to look at the world and what it's made up of, some of it's made up of matter and the rest is the unified field. So you're talking about what proportion is matter versus energy. That's kind of in the 4% also. So it seems to be that there seemed to be this number link between matter, describing the world in terms of the physical and the outside senses.
Yeah, like stars, planets, stardust is about like 4%, and then you have dark energy and dark matter that's 96%.
Exactly.
So I found that to be an interesting comparison.
It's very interesting that nature proper is made up of sort of 4 to something else, and then the mind is the same. There seemed to be some relation. So that's why I got the 96. However, what's super important. We have
lots of awesome other slides to get through too.
But I just want to, you have to understand that what they couldn't explain and what we're up to today is that the moment you have a thinking creature, a conscious person, their science falls flat. The moment you're thinking, you're changing the particles. So this 4%, trying to explain, that's what they're trying to do. Can I understand the world so I can make really smart fit choices?
Yeah. Yeah,
the moment you have a thinking creature, it doesn't work. So we have to realize that that's all science gave us so far.
We have a lot more to unpack throughout this.
And
actually, a lot of the beautiful visuals that you've made through this will further kind of explain and visually make it easy to understand your points.
Fine. All right. Keep it going. Keep it going.
What intelligence do we need to fix culture? Again, this is a perspective of like culture right now. It needs the augmentation of this perspective that you're talking about.
Eventually, if it didn't, and then talk about the computers, if you couldn't model it, if all that other stuff they left on the cutting room floor, it didn't end up in the computer. So the more that everything got automated, I mean, if you were an enlightened person, it didn't matter. But what happened is more and more education, everything had to fit into these automated, mechanized systems. That's when we became a very dangerous culture. Because what was missing with science started to be missing in engineering and economics and in medicine, and then got coded into the SAT scores. Everything started to have to reflect. It was like a data contagion.
I love this one because this is basically saying that think about all of the incredible ideas that have not been born yet because this product label, these ideas haven't come into our world yet.
Right, and so what you're trying to get at is that you can say, great job so far. And you know what, if you're looking at mechanistic, models of engineering, what they give us, great things, bridges, infrastructures, incredible.
Yes.
And even in medicine, they gave us a structure, but yet somehow that some other diseases are escalating. But why? Because it's not the full story, So it's not that you have to thank the engineers for it was a beginning. The non-living world, to understand that. But even a gun they're optimizing how fast it shoots. But if we don't understand the human mind, that's when we have to go, we're not going to get, you have to understand that if we want to end gun violence, because it starts in the mind. A lot of it
starts right here, exactly.
You can't understand where we are in the world with physical things only, with non-conscious beings. So we're at that point.
Exactly what Sadhguru was talking to David Eagleman about, who we hosted on Friday, when he said that I love science, they've done a great job, but I wish scientists would meditate. And that speaks so much truth to me about that.
But meditating is awesome, but that doesn't give you a universal model. So,
it's a step in the direction of this.
It was saying that, get some data out here, but that's such a little bit. It's a good start. We need that. But unless we understand, it's like I said, what's going on in the inner mind, you won't understand how this affects us. You won't. So what we're saying is this is the frontier.
Yeah, there's so many amazing
inward
ideas.
is the frontier.
Inward is frontier, yeah.
Exactly. And here's a disclaimer is that now you're talking like, oh, who is this chick and she's talking this big stuff. Okay, I want to say that everything I learned by doing empirical tests in live culture, working with the biggest brands, and I showed
right here.
all of these.
Yeah.
So this is not, I'm not like the other people out there in a lab tweaking at something. What we show, we're done with 1,500 girls from around the world, showing that we have an intellectual, creative, untapped capacity.
Yes.
That if formalized and used to augment engineering and economics and science, that it would have a fundamental positive impact, not just on females and humanity, but the bottom line of businesses. So
by
money
$2 billion
talks.
in new revenues made, and $2 billion again in bad investments prevented, and that's across all these different brands.
We show that you could talk, a 4% worldview might give you the answer A. The likelihood of A being wrong is 96%. Like, this is why if you look at venture capital today, they don't understand the human experience. So the likelihood, they're just guess and check. They're just sending a little, bomb out there and see what happened in the rest of the 96% brain. So in order for us to get more accurate, to understand, will this thing either create harm in humanity? Mm-hmm. Does it actually meet a desire that's left unspoken? Is there frustrations? What's going on in that 96? They don't understand how what they create really will relate to us. But yet if you go to the mechanical things, you understand how to make motors, you understand cause and effect, you understand forces, you understand the laws that govern these physical things. Yeah. We're really good in medicine when it comes to bones, and we can glue them back together. But look at all the diseases that are coming up, the mental diseases, all of these like informational diseases and viruses, that's all information based, and can't be answered by gluing bones back.
There's something else about this ethereal human experience
yes.
that needs to be discussed and figured out over time. And that has to do with this meaning, this cause and effect, this creative potential within us that is kind of being, again, just pressed down on by that current economic and political system.
Like, what we actually are saying is that we are now, instead of using what we know about science to expand and enable the full potential of humanity, all right, that the more everything's run by an algorithm, the more that algorithm doesn't have this data in it, the more humans are normalizing, maladapting, reducing ourselves down. Do I match the 4 to the denial of our own, capacity? So anyway, there it is. Science was built on the exterior.
There's
nothing
outside
wrong.
senses, that are
That's
fantastic.
all good. It got us 4%. That's a great start, guys. But this is the frontier.
The inside senses.
So not AI.
The inside senses.
That's it. But see, and everybody's it's so funny because when they're talking about that concept of singularity, it's acting like we're tapped out on learning. It doesn't account for the fact that we've been de-learning, we've been oppressing learning.
Who's we? That's what I just want to chime in here
that's
because you're talking about.
I'm sorry.
No, this is a good question, Ron. Who's the we that is oppressing?
There's a dark villain among us. I'm not in denial of this. And you talk about this dawning of a new era where we're going to go beyond our physical 3D reality and dip into deeper dimensions. But we need to understand there is something among us that does not want us to go here. It's been keeping us in this 3D realm for the longest of time. And they're scared shitless right now. They don't want this conversation happening. They don't want young people people listening to this and scratching their heads and saying, wow, this makes sense. How come my mom and dad don't talk like this? So we need to be very careful. But I'm stoked about this conversation, and
I'm
most of
interested
them.
to hear Heidi's thought about what you just said. Who do you think is doing, out of all 7.5 billion people, or even a force outside of Earth, outside of these dimensions, what do you think is causing the sort of oppression that is occurring of this creativity of these senses?
Well, so there's a couple ways to look at this. Is there bad people, or is there, so one, we could look at it mathematically. You're like, okay, awesome. You're an instrument with the boy part. I'm an instrument with the girl part. What's your instrument in the role? We know what it is physically, what men and women bring to the table for creation. But what about metaphysically, informationally? So you could just look at it to say, okay, on a purely, let's say, objective level, is that the map that we've created so far just simply left 96% on the cutting room floor. And they never thought they could model it. It was like, that's just the unknown, the unknowable. That's what they labeled it. And then there's that stuff we can't know. So it could be like,
it's more of like an accident, a human accident?
It could. This is one narrative. You could just say like, perfectly well-intended guy, and then for years you woke up, oh, that's just unknowable, don't go there. Who goes there? I mean, even the women today, oh, that's just you, sweetie, feeling that way. You're like, oh, yes, I'll just squelch that. So you could say, okay, fine. We ended up with this little lens, the outward lens, and anything we could see there was real, and the rest was unknowable anyway.
And
so
inside was unknowable, yeah.
And then that keeps going for years, and then it starts, and what we actually show, it starts draining out of the methods. Then it drains, if it's not in the methods, it's draining out the things we create with the methods, and then we're interacting with it. And it drains in our brain.
It's like the business model of social media is the attention economy, rather than actually making fruitful connections between people and making humanity better in many ways.
We are on an algorithm of extinction, so that would be one way. That's just an objective way, because we weren't involved. But again, is it these people or not? And then if you look at epigenetics, like how many years have been passed along that these things aren't real, and
lots of years
exactly
of not tuning inward, not understanding the inside senses.
So that's coming along with you, all that epigenetic. That's one way to look at it. However, there's some other weird shit, because I've already cracked these codes, and I went on a tour of scientists from all around the world.
We actually said this interestingly over here. We said the scientific method is incomplete. I like that way that we described it.
I wasn't supposed to say it was broken. Well, it wasn't. Well,
it's incomplete. There's more to complete it over time, and let's keep adding to it with this inside senses that you're describing.
Right, and I mean, again, you could think of it as great intention, but I wanted to add one thing. When we discovered this new extension to science, it started to hint to a lot of the ancient spiritual principles. So we went to get support to peer review from scientists all around the world, very famous, multiple Nobel laureates, but we also went to people like the scientists that work with the Dalai Lama, monks at the Vatican, because it started to, the Kabbalistic rabbis. We did the whole debug show, but all of that because it started to mimic ancient doctrine.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what's super interesting is that...
So we were more enlightened before. We understood more of the inside senses before.
But yes, well, that's really, at the end of the day, all of the universal doctrines are trying to tell you that they're trying to give you a method, their best effort of trying to tell you a mechanics, give you an explanation of the inner forces and the inner knowledge and how important it is. But they did it in a very ornamental way. But I will want to add on to that, all of these spiritual classic principles have mythologies, parts of their narrative about women having certain information and losing that information. It's like Adam and Eve. Who spoke to the tree of knowledge? Who was talking to Eve? So they all had this universal narrative of women knowing something and that knowledge getting lost and falling into a dark period where we don't know that which will evolve us, that's fit, and that which will harm us. That is universal. And in some ways, what we just find in the inner mind is the directional information to say this is where evolution is, and these are the things that are good or bad. So I asked myself, why universally did women forego what they knew and meant to give that all to men? And I will even say that if you look at the Knight's Grail, seeking the Holy Grail, that's all about looking for the lost information of evolution, longevity, life, the Grail, you know. And what was the symbol that they sought? That symbol was basically the shape of the vagina. They had always something to do with the woman. This again is witnessed across multiple cultures. So there is something that went down, and nobody could tell me what. Was it like some sort of like metaphysical, like mnemonic flu, and one group got over arrogant and one went too small? I don't know, but it's something, this is a universal. So It was very interesting because many of these people said, and high spiritual people that were really, and they like, oh, the world is waiting. A lot of Kabbalistic rabbis, we've been waiting for this. So it's predicted that we would recover knowledge.
Yeah, it totally feels like it is coming into society. It feels really good, actually. It was the first time that I was judging a First Robotics tournament when there was a group of girls that won the Inspire Award, which is the biggest award. And it felt so good seeing just a group of girls that were feeling actualized, doing something that was completely different than what cultural norms are like.
But we have to also differentiate from a woman participating in the 4% science and kicking butt, that's fine, from expand a new frontier of science.
Yes.
And using the tools in that to both correct and expand. And that's really what I'm so like annoyed with the Silicon Valley today.
We don't know these tools yet, though.
No,
Even
we
though you're
do.
Right. Well, no. We don't know how to. We're trying to figure out how to measure meaning and measure cause and effect and creativity and these.
Well, no, but that's what we discovered in our, because we didn't just meet the spiritual people. We met linguists, logicians, epigenetics. We even met the Stephen Hawking's lab and presented our new science. So I want to say that, how do you say, it wasn't known, but that's what we discovered. So we did discover the math, the language, it needed a language. Men could never master they thought it was beyond words of the inner mind. So we found the language of math is all hidden in there. This is why it said, new tools. So we can take science and add this data in.
Correct.
And we can take engineering and extend it so it's more, cultural, new form of cultural engineering. We can expand our understanding of biology, but it wasn't known.
And we just got to figure out what those intelligences, those models, metrics, equations, etc.
Well, actually,
math.
we did it already, and that's what we're donating back. So it's not like we have to. That was our 12-year experiment. I just thought in the beginning.
So then, this is what I asked you before, but then, like, what are those equations and models?
First of all, God, okay, I'm not going to spit it out. I'm saying, okay, so remember when they talk about non-time space? Time space is artificial.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I can explain really, really quickly, but let's just, all the people you're interviewing are always talking about time space isn't real, like, and holographic universe. You speak to those people, I know you do, don't you? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, well, time space is like one picture of the world right here, right now, and that's all that damn well matters, okay? That's the knowledge of the science. But now they know epigenetically, shit's been building up in our DNA, and they also know that somehow we're connected to other things. So that's what I'm just saying is a whole bunch of other information that we need to understand what am I just like we crave food and all of a sudden you need some like protein. In this stuff we've blocked, there is things about what hurts us and what's good for us. So your skin has an algorithm. It's like, I'm gonna put it over fire, it burns. That you came with that algorithm, did you not? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the inner mind's got lots of important algorithms, and there are different things that are harmful. Like if something burns your skin or tastes bad, it's because your body's rejecting it. It's giving you data. There's an algorithm to protect you so that you're making great choices. Another thing, algorithms you have is things that you're craving. I'm craving water. That's an algorithm.
That's touch based. So that's partially an outside sense as well. Fire and the hand, touch, etc. Pain.
And your eyes can pick up and look at patterns.
Yeah, and then
all of this.
But then there's things that are not the exterior senses, which is what you're indicating to here.
And they have
interior
similar
senses.
properties.
And so basically what I'm just trying to unpack is, you did the 12 years, like we got to just, I'm just curious, what are then the math, the models, the intelligence?
Well, I'm telling you some bigger pictures. They're going to tell you, there's a whole lot of information. One is really important to understand is that anything we interact with in the world, it picks up crap. So you breathe in some oxygen, and we got to get rid of the carbon. Pick up a little carbon, okay? You eat some food, you take a dump. Interactions, you drink, you take a piss. Some you need, and some is not good for you. And we have algorithms in place, okay? What if you eat really bad fish? Well, then you have the run algorithm. Get rid of that shit, or the puke algorithm. Well, what we actually show is that the part of our brain that we're using is only the frontal lobes. We've actually shut down the algorithms for us to understand what is actually true or not. So even information in the outer mind will think something's true if it's repeated. It's only mechanical. So all I have to do is repeat something good enough. It does not discern what is true or false, what is good for you or bad. So simply repetition creates truth in the frontal lobes. So one of the things in the back brain we're shutting down is the same kind of algorithms that we have for other interactions that are going to tell you if we need to get rid of this thing or not. We've lost access to the correction mechanism. So that's is very important. It's going to tell you that just as though something burns or hurts or not, it's something about some thing that you're interacting with, environment, is actually nutritious or not. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
So
this
would be a really important time for an example, because you made the fish example, bad fish, and you get puke or poop algorithm. In this case, it would be maybe something regarding energy. You intake some sort of energy from someone else as a human being, and you kind of makes you feel a certain way, and then you just have to have that part of your algorithms in your brain activated in order to know whether or not that made you feel happy, sad, or what emotion, and then maybe what to do with that information.
Well, I think the best is to
look
at...
Wow, I can't believe that was...
What?
15 minutes.
What happened?
Yeah.
We're already into 40.
So no, I'm just saying I can't believe that was already 40 minutes. It's absolutely nuts. And I knew this would happen when we first started talking, but that's just the way that life is that we only have this is a 15-minute timer.
Let's produce her own show. Let's do something every week.
Yeah. Let's explore what stuff like this would look like. So, so we have a lot of work to do to make this very relatable for the masses, and whatever that ends up looking like.
Is it live still or not?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
I have a ton of case studies.
Yeah. You do. You've made a really great, incredible presentation, and also just your last 12 years of understanding this and all that stuff. So I think what we should do, for this episode at least, is do our best to get through as much of what we're like of these highlights as possible.
All right.
Yeah. And then we'll come to more of what we were just talking about. But
Okay, so we've been told our whole life feelings aren't fact, all right? So we all have instances where we're in a situation that doesn't feel right, or for example, just think of modern advertising. Like if your lips don't look this way, you're not attractive. Well, now that's in my belief system. Heard that enough? Now your entire sense of your own sexuality is going to be around some manufactured imprint of your lips. At that point, it doesn't even matter. But if you had something deeper, now we're so disconnected, it makes us a victim. It makes us malleable to these nasty patterns that can control us. And we've lost that recovery. We've lost the ability to self-intersect. Okay? So when you're young, you get conditioned. And what we actually end up showing, where meditation is quiet the brain, what we end up showing is this inside information is trying to tell us all sorts of important stuff.
Here's another good example of what I was mentioning earlier, is that you're the 96-4, this is split 50-50. Do you know what I mean? So there just needs to be, I guess, a little bit of cohesion in the sense of like, what percentage do we actually objectively understand is really this outside senses, and what percentage is inside senses? And then it would be really important to maybe have a list here as well. If outside senses have these 5 relatable images, what would be the 5 or 3 relatable images of the inside senses? Meaning, creativity, cause and effect. What would those look like, and how could they relatably
tension? It's a lot. Tension, like forces, drives, tensions,
those are
desires. Huge. These are fundamental.
And like if we wrote them here, then it would be easier for people to understand as well. And this is kind of where I'd love to.
We'll talk about guns. I mean, here we don't understand. What you bring to the gun. If you're bitter, if you've just been abused, and you show up at the gun. If science is trying to describe what the hell's really happening. What's the reality of this? That's a different reality if you have somebody who's been abused their whole life in front of the gun than if you have somebody who's really passive like me. I mean, you could just grab the meaning of the gun. For me, I could just use it to pound avocados. That's as useful as it is for me. So meaning has to understand what the state of the inner mind. So one of the things is that the other thing is that, so there's universal truths. That means that there are forces, there are drives, there are facts, there is all this information that we have the ability to use that part of our mind to document. Why? So that we can do what science wants. Predict behaviors, design cultures, diagnose problems. This is very useful shit. And we need to recover that. And it's not just the new. So that becomes new data. Intelligence. Exactly. And so
the mind is the new frontier.
It is, and that's what I'm saying. We convert it into data. And this is just a little bit of me back at Princeton, but it's how I learned that. And we kind of went through that.
And I want to make it clear here, this is another one of those kind of like areas that I think is really important to address for our audience that might be feeling a little bit like, I don't really resonate with this. And let me explain kind of like my take on how I think we can all resonate with this better. It's not that 100% of all men think that what is being described here regarding maybe feeling or senses that are internal, they don't think that it's irrational, weird, and just opinion. It's not 100% of men that feel that way. It's a minority of men that feel that way.
Wait, actually, I'm stopping you on this one. What does it say? It says science and objective reality, okay? We have no framework of understanding the universal pattern. It's not about what any man said, because talk to any good guy on Wall Street. He knows he trusts his intuition. I'm talking about what can we model and all agree on about happening with how do we describe nature? We're part of nature. We're part of living systems.
This can be misleading for a guy to look at and just say that, oh fuck, I'm being categorized as irrational. I'm being categorized as somebody that thinks that women are irrational and weird.
But that's just getting kind of. This is a conversation of science.
This is just the idea is that we are not saying that 100% of men think this way. We are saying that a small percentage of people think just that way, but then there's all this beautiful gray area that exists, which is what happens inside of these senses, of these expanding the scientific method. And if we were to figure out how to expand the scientific method and figure out how to add the new sort of girl-approved ideologies of the scientific method into our current system.
Now what you're missing, this is really useful, because what I'm talking about here is, why did I get an all-girl scientific peer review group? Because if I could show that girls could sense patterns that were universal and had never been documented, and there was enough girls, we became statistically relevant. This is what I'm talking about. That's what could never happen. They never have had a way to explain the inner mind, that was measurable, repeatable, duplicatable, or statistically relevant. So even when people have, like all the spiritual people, maybe they have a sense, they're still an anomaly. They're still an outlier. And so it's actually what we call outliers. Truth, go to the next one for a second.
Yep.
What did we do? The point, so where the men used our big data hack, where they modeled based on what they could sense outward, we actually started to document what we felt from inside.
Yep.
To realize that it was as universal. Like, if what I mean by universal, I say, hey, what do you see right there? You see it's a fuzzy bunny. Oh, well, we could feel things that were, and everybody saw a fuzzy bunny. Then you can go, statistically, it's been peer reviewed, it's a funny fuzzy bunny. But what I'm saying was the same thing. There's information inside of us that could extend our understanding of what's happening here.
Yes,
even what's happening with us. And so
it's also very hubristic for people to just think that, oh, it's just scientific method, that's it. It's just overly self-confident. It's not actually enabling us to realize that, oh my God, this whole essence of tuning inward and senses that are inside is just have so much value to add to the scientific method.
Okay, but also there's great philosophers like Immanuel Kant, Wittgenstein, Hegel. All of them were at war with the scientists. I'm not the only one. They just couldn't prove it. Look at the spiritual people and the scientists have been at war for a long time. Okay, men unite around science. But guess what? They don't unite around religion. And we have so many wars because of that. But they will still unite around science. So not having a language of the inner is actually, part of war today. So this is all that I said is like just as though men did, they went and had all these experiments saying what can we all agree on, what we can language and math do, and they gave science and modern engineering and modern economics. Awesome. But they just left shit on the cutting room floor. Their hubris was forgetting all spirituality or dismissing it. Well, actually they didn't. They just said it was opt-in. But the problem came where every part of cultural design and understanding humanity had to comply with a very little lens. That little lens became codified, notarized, the compliance. Soon we served the 4%. So that was what flipped. Instead of that 4% being part of the information, we started to serve it. So humans became the slave and the 4% became the master. And unless we start correcting that, it's the reversal of the power. We gave the power to the number, not the power to the human technology. The human mind, the human is the untapped potential. And the singularity acts like we're tapped out, and we're trying to say we've only just begun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hell yeah. That's a great way to cut the end of what we were just talking about. Heidi, holy crap, what is the new language? What is the new math, the new metrics, the new models, new forces, new dimensions? I'm super excited. I was envisioning this sort of transitionary period where we're no longer the slave to just the scientific method and its principles for just the last 500 or so years, and not just the slave to the external senses, but rather like more and more people are starting to integrate the new senses, the internal senses, all of these new languages and math into and augment the scientific method. It's going to be such an interesting ride going into the future.
We have so much more creative potential. Of course we only got a little taste, but what we really show is that it's not us versus nature, and that's where Darwin got it all wrong. It shows there's a link between our biological evolution and what we create. Nature is our friend. It's one big co-creation in the evolutionary process, but we have taken our hands off that steering wheel. We're born with the capacity to create and evolve our own fitness individually and collectively. And the sad part is, instead of expanding, we're fitting into smaller and smaller grids. And AI and will perma-seal the fuck out of human potential. And we will trap us in a very downward, there's no correction mechanism. That's the biggest thing. Unless we open up that frontier, we're going to let the incomplete knowledge tell us that's all there is. We need to open that up to correct ourselves. That's the key. So our ability to drive our own evolution, our ability, it's called information healing, to correct many of the physical illnesses. This gets to the root of information. It's all DNA, it's all information. And our thoughts are driving our DNA. And if they are being lost, confused, corrupted. It is a corruption. We are now mastering our own extinction. And it's nobody's fault.
They are mastering our own extinction. It's not we. There are people acquiescing. Yes, of course, there are people that are not aware of what's happening.
No.
But
okay, but I guess I say we because I'm not trying to point fingers. Bad data is our enemy. And let no anybody tell you that they have any freaking idea of what smart is. Because to understand smart, you have to understand the entirety of the mind. Mm-hmm. And they did not. And it is dangerous. It is a dangerous promise of singularity. Peter, whatever, Demetrius, you listen up, dude. Dementor.
Ray Kurzweil?
Those guys need to listen the hell up. And we need to have a talk if he's listening.
Heidi, do you have any children?
So dangerous. No.
That's a shame.
So the way that you were talking, especially in the last minute or so here, about if we're not careful about what we're doing moving forward, it makes it a lot more, makes us more susceptible to having a negative next couple of decades with the sort of exponential technologies that are around us. And I completely agree with you. Mm-hmm. If we get more of the humanitarian principles, prioritizing
codes
feeling,
are all damn codes.
Getting the codes of exactly what we're chatting about these new languages, these new maths of the internal senses and of everything else about human behavior, we're going to succeed. We will succeed.
Unbelievable what you can do. Anything can be designed to be an object of human transformation, of bliss, of delight. We are designing misery into our world, by choice. We are not in control of the power of our will. The control we have over our happiness. You're asking, why are you so happy? Because I'm working with my brain. I'm not working with this dirty data anymore. I've liberated myself to be working with
this is so important because we were just talking about this at the beginning, but you used the word delight. And delight is this, what was the exact way that it was described? It was described as great pleasure of life. And I loved the idea of boys and girls in their delight, this sort of great pleasure, this overwhelming pleasure. You can see happiness in their soul. And whatever happens with the economic and political educational machine that does whatever it does to their minds, it's not maximizing their delight throughout life. And we see a lot of adults today, including myself now as an adult, that is literally looking back and going, why are we squashing the creative potential of so much of this beauty in girls and boys?
Yeah, think of this. We have a line. You can feel all of this. And first, only this you're allowed to acknowledge. You're probably crazy if you admit the other. That's shrinking because there's so much error in that system. When you're expanding it out, everything is wonder. Oh, and this is connected to this, and this is what we can do. And look at how much you're savoring. It's just a chair. No, it's not a chair. Look at this cool curve and how it fits on my back. We're shutting down the human experience. Yeah. Think of science as giving language. All of what's locked back there is a language of describing how things feel and how they feel to us and what's, the nuance and what could be. There's so much that we've locked away. And so it is that we're training ourselves to die. You think of it as death as less experience. And you can see, think of entropy, a free system. The more entropy, higher order enters patterns, but it's also free. We don't know where it is because so many possibilities. We're actually going the opposite. We're eliminating our own possible ability to feel, to know, to create, That's tragedy.
It's tragedy.
It's a tragedy
We're gonna
that
flip
we can
that
turn
on its
around
head.
anytime.
Let's do
We
it.
can start tomorrow. This is trainable skills. Anybody can learn to
got
use their
this.
brain better.
We
That's
got
it.
this. We got this.
My brain,
All right,
my brain hurts.
Last couple questions on the way out. These are some of the questions that we ask on the show a lot. First question is: do you think that we're alone in the cosmos?
Oh shit. Well, I don't think if you actually even understand epigenetics, that those that lived before you are passing on information. You're living in the life experiences of for thousands of years. And if you realize that energy is affecting you, I mean, before I go to alien beings, I just think we're living in the presence of so many beings that have distilled information and are there to try to support you.
Yes.
Whether they're talking to your genes for generations or whether they're interconnected.
Yes.
So just that very thought that I'm not alone in this.
I love that. You're looking at the lineage of all 100 billion humans that have lived and died before us today. And we're totally not alone in that sense. All of that information is baked right into who we are. All of the language that has been spoken, all of the art that's been made. Yeah, let's keep passing it on. Do you think we're in a simulation?
Well, I don't like that word because I think we associate that word with some dumb sci-fi stuff, and then we get all weird and like in visualization. But for example, if I thought you looked like a murderer that I saw on TV, and I'm in a cafe sitting next to you, I can create a whole scenario in my head that might as well be live and present. And that if you're not in command of your own fears, the part that 96, it's a very creative thing back there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's imagining all sorts of scenes and stuff. What's the damn difference?
It's a simulator.
It's a simulator to project, make better choices, but unchecked and never learned how to access, it is
yes.
a dangerous one.
Agreed.
And instead, that's what becomes again a tool to our destruction. So it's
And it becomes epigenetically ingrained.
oh God,
to be squelched.
Maladapt. We're not. It's supposed to. That is supposed to be evolving us. We're downward. So yeah, everything. We're living in a simulation if we never learn to understand the beliefs and the bad coding that's driving us. But the more you become in command of your own mind, the more you look at your mind and go, oh, how the fuck did that stupid thing get in there? Fearlessly recorrecting the thing, then it's less of a simulation. So it's only a simulation. That's why I don't like the word if we don't taught how much is going on back there that's creating what we think is here. We want to scrape back as much as we can, throw those curtains up. Then we're living in what is real. Remember, science is to describe reality. And if we don't know what's back there, we don't know what fake shit we're making up. And it might as well be real. So make it physical. When you make it, the simulation, and then VR, what the fuck's that? Right? It makes it feel so not every day. This is everyday importance to everyone that lives. Everyone, if you want to personally and for your family and for everyone, make the most intelligent decision for now and for the future. We got to pull back curtains and get through that 4%.
Yeah,
That's
chip
real.
away at the boulder of ignorance.
We remove the simulation by getting in reality. That's what science was supposed to give us, didn't it? Okay, it got a good start. Great start, guys. Not the full story.
Here we go into the full story.
Yes, the full story.
I like how you make that as relatable as possible to today and to moving forward. Although a lot of the conversations around the virtual realities, as well as life on other planets and what that looks like to be simulated, is actually extremely important to increase someone's awareness to new dimensions of thinking. Simultaneously, it's extremely important to be able to dive into the understanding that if we don't understand our emotional states and we don't get that 96%, that we're actually taking a huge backseat in terms of understanding reality. Last question is, what do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
The energy that lives in every human, and I think it's just dying to know how to come out to to be useful. I think that's our fundamental drive, is to be validated, not selfish, but to be useful and to make your life matter. And I think that there's nothing more nutritious to experience, more inspirational, is, I am and I can leave something. So I think the energy that we have locked away is nothing is more powerful, and that's the abundance. It's not in the stuff. And I think the release of that energy is beauty, because it's an energy of service and creation. And I think that was the most beautiful thing Mother Nature ever created. And where I feel like a lot of people are like, look to others as victims. Now look at when you actually see that energy, witness that, look at someone and what they are and see yourself in them. It's seeing that energy, I'm alive, and then you become a team. I think that energy is the 96 going back, seeing that life in people, that's the beginning of Team Human again. And it's scraping away all that stuff that we're taught in education makes us, and all these physical damn differences, skin color, makes me different, or your sex differences and race, that doesn't matter. That energy is what bonds us. And I think that's the most beautiful thing. And if we release that, we come back to unity together. And I think nothing is more spectacular and can do the most profound of anything ever created. So
we love maximizing individual and collective potential, and we're very grateful to have had you on the show.
Oh,
this has been such a pleasure, Heidi.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I feel like I need a hug.
Oh, I get a hug. What's
I feel like
this?
I need to hug
Don't
you.
mind.
Leave her alone. Get away from there.
Yummy. Thank you.
Get away from there.
So yummy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yummy.
This has been such a pleasure, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. If you guys had a good time, definitely go check out girlapproved.us, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's up there.
Girlapproved.us.
It's coming up there.
It's in the bio, so check it out. We'll make sure it's getting there. Also, everybody, definitely give us a comment below. Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you think about unlocking these new senses and augmenting the scientific method and human experience, maximizing individual and collective potential, and keeping that delight, that delight of a child, that delight of a girl, the delight of a boy, and bringing them forth into the world with that delight continuous over time. This great sense of pleasure. And also join us, subscribe, join us on Patreon. We greatly need your help in supporting the studio and increasing our reach and impact, so do join us with that. And join us in rebirthing the public intellectual and in inspiring you to build the future. Thank you, Ron, our producer and director. Thanks, Heidi. Thank you so much.
You too.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Much love.
Bye.
Peace.